This is from our camera reporter in Miyagi. And it looks like the tsunami has engulfed several cities.
At exactly 2:46 p.m. on March 11, 2011, the seafloor 80 miles east of Japan suddenly lurched 164 feet horizontally and thrust upward 33 feet. This single moment of geological violence was the most powerful earthquake in Japan's recorded history. The magnitude 9.0 Tōhoku earthquake released energy equivalent to roughly 31 to 32 billion tons of TNT, about 2 million times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. What followed was even more devastating. A tsunami with waves reaching up to 45 feet high traveled across the Pacific at 435 miles per hour and crashed into Japan's coast, killing over 18,000 people and displacing hundreds of thousands more. Today, on Natural Forces, we'll discover how tectonic plates create tsunamis, why this particular tsunami was 3 times larger than scientists expected, and meet the incredible heroes who saved countless lives. From the nuclear workers who chose to stay behind at Fukushima to the 107,000 rescue personnel who mounted Japan's largest peacetime operation, prepare to understand both the physics of destruction and the power of human resilience. Japan sits at one of the most geologically violent spots on Earth, where 4 massive tectonic plates converge. The Pacific Plate had been sliding beneath the North American Plate at about 3 inches per year for centuries, building up enormous stress along a fault zone called the Japan Trench. Think of it like slowly bending a ruler until it snaps back violently. Recent studies from Columbia University reveal something remarkable. This wasn't just any ordinary earthquake. Scientists discovered a thin, slippery clay layer lining the fault that allowed the plates to slide an unprecedented distance. Most large earthquakes see fault slips of 60 to 80 feet, but this clay layer acted like geological grease, allowing a slip of 164 feet, the largest fault displacement ever recorded. When that much seafloor moves that quickly, it's like a giant hand waving vigorously underwater in a bathtub. The waves spread out in all directions, but here's where the physics gets truly frightening. As tsunami waves approach shallow coastal waters, their energy concentrates and their height multiplies dramatically. A wave that's only 3 feet high in deep ocean can become 30 feet high when it hits the coast. But something puzzling happened with the 2011 tsunami that has kept scientists busy for over a decade. Tsunami sizes usually follow predictable patterns based on earthquake magnitude, but this one produced waves 3 to 4 times bigger than expected. The reason for this size difference lies in a geological plot twist that unfolded over millions of years. Research published in Nature Geoscience suggests that the angle at which the Pacific Plate dives under Japan has been gradually getting shallower, creating an unusual geological setup. This shallow angle caused stress to build up not just at the main fault, but also created a secondary extensional fault 30 miles closer to shore that amplified the tsunami's power. Scientists discovered this through an ingenious detective story. Recordings of aftershocks showed scores of smaller earthquakes carpeting the seabed, suggesting the entire region was releasing strain built up over centuries. The waves that resulted were unlike anything in recorded history. In some areas, the tsunami reached heights of 130 feet and traveled up to 6 miles inland, moving at speeds of 435 miles per hour near the coast. To put that in perspective, these waves were moving faster than most commercial aircraft during takeoff, carrying the destructive power of millions of tons of water. Within minutes of the earthquake, Japan's early warning system had delivered alerts across the country, giving Tokyo residents a full minute of warning before the shaking reached the capital. But for coastal communities, time was running out fast. The tsunami reached the nearest shores in just 30 minutes, and this is where our first heroes emerge. In Kamaishi, a coastal city that had experienced devastating tsunamis before, something extraordinary happened that scientists now call the Miracle of Kamaishi. Students at local schools had been taught about tsunami physics in their mathematics classes, learning to calculate wave speeds and arrival times. When the earthquake struck, these students didn't wait for official instructions. They immediately began evacuating to higher ground, saving not only themselves but also inspiring nearby adults to follow. The science education that taught them that tsunami waves travel at the square root of gravity times water depth literally saved their lives. Meanwhile, at Minami-Sanriku, a town that would be almost completely destroyed, a 25-year-old emergency broadcast announcer, Miki Endo, stayed at her post until the very last moment. For critical minutes, she continued broadcasting evacuation warnings even as the water rose around the 3-story building where she worked. Her voice on the loudspeakers guided residents to safety right up until the building itself was engulfed.
10メートル以上の津波が押し寄せています。高台へ避難してください。ただいま、宮城県内に10メートル以上の津波が押し寄せています。
As the tsunami waves propagated across the Pacific following the laws of fluid dynamics, an equally powerful force was mobilizing on land: human determination. For much of Japan's post-war period, the SDF, Japan's self-defense forces, had remained largely invisible to the public, but on March 11th, they emerged as the nation's most relied upon first responders. Within hours, the SDF organized Japan's first-ever Joint Disaster Relief Task Force, deploying approximately 107,000 personnel at peak, along with 543 aircraft and 14 warships. The numbers alone tell an incredible story, but the human cost was immense. By March 14th, just 3 days after the disaster, SDF personnel had rescued 14,900 people from the devastation. But perhaps the most extraordinary example of human determination came from 43-year-old Dr. Hideaki Akaiwa. When the tsunami flooded his hometown of Ishinomaki with 10 feet of water, Akaiwa was told by rescue workers to wait for military assistance. Instead, he found scuba gear and dove into the freezing, debris-filled floodwaters. Swimming 200 yards through floating cars, downed power lines, and twisted metal, he navigated to his submerged house and rescued his wife from the upper floor. 4 days later, when his elderly mother was still missing, Akaiwa dove back into the neck-deep waters and searched until he found her trapped on the second floor of a neighbor's house. Even after saving his own family, Akaiwa continued riding his bicycle through the wreckage daily, equipped only with a flashlight, knife, and water, searching for other survivors who needed help. Meanwhile, 80-year-old Sumi Abe and her 16-year-old grandson Jin survived 9 days trapped in their collapsed house, defying the brutal physics of hypothermia by rationing refrigerator contents and sharing body heat in a space smaller than most closets. 60 miles south of the main tsunami impact zone, the waves that physicists had calculated would be contained by 30-foot seawalls easily overtopped them, reaching heights of 45 feet as they slammed into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Here, the laws of nuclear physics created a crisis that demanded a special kind of heroism. When the tsunami knocked out cooling systems and backup generators, reactor cores began overheating toward catastrophic meltdown. Without intervention, nuclear physicists calculated that radioactive contamination could render an area the size of Connecticut uninhabitable for decades, forcing the evacuation of Tokyo's 35 million residents. On March 15th, as radiation levels spiked to deadly levels, Tokyo Electric Power Company proposed evacuating all workers from the plant. But about 50 workers made an extraordinary choice. They refused to leave. These weren't just company employees following orders. The group that media dubbed the Fukushima 50 actually grew to include hundreds of volunteers who came from across Japan, engineers from Toshiba and Hitachi, firefighters from Tokyo, Osaka, Yokohama, Kawasaki, Nagoya, and Kyoto, and specialists from multiple contractor companies. They understood the physics of radiation exposure better than anyone, how ionizing radiation tears through DNA, increasing cancer risk with every minute of exposure. They knew that working in the damaged reactor buildings meant accepting radiation doses that would normally end a career, if not a life. Yet they stayed because they understood something even more important. Without their sacrifice, millions of innocent people would suffer. To protect their own long-term health while still doing the dangerous work, they limited themselves to just 15-minute shifts inside the damaged buildings, spreading exposure across more people to ensure everyone could continue working. Two young workers, Kazuhiko Kokubo, who was 24, and Yoshiki Terashima, who was 21, made the ultimate sacrifice. They died while conducting emergency repairs immediately after the earthquake. All said, the Fukushima 50's collective heroism, choosing certain personal risk to prevent unimaginable catastrophe for millions, represents one of history's most profound acts of selfless courage. The 2011 tsunami left behind more than destruction. It left a detailed scientific record that continues teaching us about both geological and human resilience. Researchers collected over 6,400 tsunami wave measurements across Japan and the Pacific, creating the most comprehensive data set ever assembled. This data revealed a crucial insight. While we can predict tsunami propagation with remarkable accuracy using physics, human behavior during disasters follows equally important patterns that require scientific understanding. Studies showed that more than 40% of survivors didn't evacuate immediately after the earthquake, instead searching for family members or returning home for possessions. The most effective tsunami education programs now combine both realities, teaching people the mathematical relationship between earthquake magnitude and wave arrival times, while also preparing them psychologically for split-second decisions. On March 11, 2011, geological forces released energy equivalent to 2 million atomic bombs and moved Japan's main island 8 feet eastward. Yet human response was equally extraordinary. 107,000 rescue workers saved nearly 15,000 lives in the first few days alone. The heroes of March 11th prove that while we cannot control natural forces, we can choose how we respond to them. In a world where earthquakes will continue generating tsunamis according to physical laws, our best defense combines better warning systems with the knowledge that ordinary people consistently choose to become extraordinary. What would you do when faced with such a choice?